You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hey, loves. Have you heard about the other podcast on the We Deepen Network? First, Political Hope by Indy Rishi explores the lives, events, and minds pivotal for human evolution. Not always overtly political, Political Hope is intended to empower you to recognize your inherent voice and ability to enact progress in your local and global communities. Second, Legends by Dr. Nikki is a journey to activate your fullest self-expression. Dr. Nikki interviews leaders who have transcended perceived limitations in order to make meaningful impact. Guests share their stories to teach you how to optimize your body, brain, and spiritual connection to manifest a truly fantastic life. Find Political Hope and Legends at WeDeepen.com or search for them now in your podcast app. Hit the subscribe or follow button and check them out after this episode of Deepen with Christina. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional love coach for anybody who wants to put a little skip in the dating journey or to deepen relationship with their significant other, or even to feel connected to community. We Deepen has recently added a matchmaking component. So if you are interested in any of the above, go to WeDeepen.com, click on the coaching and matchmaking link, and you'll find details there. Also, we have a lot of up and coming experiences for you. Unleash, one of my favorites, is happening September 23rd through the 25th in Austin, Texas. It's a 2-night, 3-day camping, ecstatic dance, tantra workshops. I'm going to be facilitating the dating dojo there solo. Today's guest actually has helping to create the dating dojo. We are going to be facilitating that at the 8th annual biohacking conference, which is happening the week before Unleash in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills. It is 3 days with a bunch of biohackers, health nuts, just doctors, really smart people. And there's 2,000 people in attendance. And I'm going to be there along with Ken Page, who you're going to meet in a moment. And 200 of the attendees who are currently single are going to be guided through an interactive workshop to dive into discovering the skill sets that help them in finding love, which is something that most of us weren't taught, and also have the opportunity to meet and practice with one another. So go check out that calendar, WeDeepen.com. When you get there, in the top right-hand corner, you will click sign up, create a profile. There's a member directory, and you'll get to connect with all types of people who are primarily growth-minded, who are also journeying through the transformational experiences that you see listed on the site. If you enjoy this podcast, please do subscribe, follow. Spotify has the rating button at the top. So please go in and give us, honest ratings. We always love 5s, but give us an honest rating there. And this helps more people to find the podcast and supports us in keeping to it. So today I have Ken Page with you, and I don't always read the bios of the guest. Sometimes I just go directly into the conversation. However, Ken is an OG in the world of dating and intimacy and relationships. And I want you to know who you're hearing from within this conversation. So Ken Page he's an LCSW, is a renowned psychotherapist and a leading voice of hope and wisdom for everyone seeking to find and cultivate healthy, lasting love. He's the host of the Deeper Dating podcast. He is also the author of the best-selling book, Deeper Dating, How to Drop the Games of Seduction and Discover the Power of Intimacy, and the creator of the Deeper Dating Intensive. He has been featured on the Oprah magazine, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Cosmopolitan, The Advocate, and more, and is passionate about helping people understand the search for love as one of the greatest spiritual adventures in life. I love that. Thinking of dating as one of the greatest spiritual adventures in life. And he celebrates the inclusion of LGBTQ community into a banquet of wiser relationship with wisdom and advice. Ken lives in Long Beach, New York with his husband and children and their pets. Ken, I'm so honored to be working with you, and also
so glad to be here.
And also to be a recipient of your wisdom. I am so grateful to, as we develop the dating dojo and continue to deepen our work relationship, and how beautiful we deepen plus deeper dating. It just makes complete sense. And during this process of working together, I get to, again, be the recipient of your wisdom, personalized towards me and what I'm experiencing. And I'm so appreciative of, because one of your last text messages to me was, it was around dating, and I had shared something personal with you. And you said, primarily of all questions and all advice, just continue to ask yourself, do you feel safe with this person? And today's conversation, I want to deepen into that of what is safety. And then also talk about polarities and reframing polarities, because I see that the polarity conversation, I sort of like, I'm in it, but I'm looking around on it. And there's something that I feel is just much deeper at play. So I'd love to get into both of those things with you, and welcome to Deepen with Christina.
So happy to be here with you, Christina. Thank you for inviting me.
So within that message first, do you feel safe with this person? As it's a question to ask yourself. I wanted to go into, what is safety? Because being a event producer, oftentimes, and especially in the space of intimacy, I sometimes struggle with that framing, because what is safety to me may be something different to somebody else. So if I was to say you're welcoming and you're coming into a safe space, I don't really know what's safe to you. Like I can say, I think that we oftentimes, and not to go so dramatic, but this is true, the world that we live in, we think that the elementary schools are safe for children. They're not always.
Right.
So could you, how does someone even, and maybe I'm answering my question, because as I'm even thinking further is like your nervous system, how is your nervous system feeling in connection with somebody else? Could you go into a little bit more of what you mean within that question?
Sure. This is like kind of a distillation of a lot of years of thinking and a lot of years of work, that this is the primary question that we should be asking in our search for love. And I want to frame this as thinking of your search for love as part of your evolution in the deepest ways, that the skills you learn when you do wiser dating are the exact skills that are not only going to help you find better love, but keep it alive and keep it flourishing, because those are the most important skills of all. And the skills of dating are nothing more than the skills of true intimacy. So always the ground level of all of this is the experience of safety. You can't have good love without a basic feeling of safety. You can't have good sex without a basic feeling of safety. And that doesn't mean that you can't be scared, excited, and challenged, but it means that there is a sense of inner safety with the other person. So what does that mean? That means that you have a sense that they have a generosity of spirit, that they get joy from giving, that they care about seeing you, that they're big enough to leave their own framing of the world, to step out of that and listen to your framing of the world, and that they have an interest in that. That they're willing to be humble and to realize that they have things to learn. If you say that something hurts you or scares you, that they don't step over that or override it, that they care about truth, that they care about goodness, and not just when it's easy, but when it's hard too. And you see their kind of commitment to living that way. That kind of person is the only kind of person that you ultimately want to date if you want to have a happy future. Period. The end. And that's the kind of person who needs to be in your deep inner circle. And that is when intimacy turns into joy and meaning. And it's not what we're taught. This is what we're kind of taught. We're taught, like, look for who you're attracted to, and they're attracted to you, and they seem decent, and things look like basically right. And then you hope and pray that their character ends up being good. That's fine. It's not wise enough, and it will not form your presence in the world in a way that's going to magnetize the love you're looking for. What does is asking yourself, like, with this person, does my soul feel safe? And when the answer to that is yes, it's like if you picture like a necklace, a beautiful necklace with like a hook on the top, and then there's a line, and there are pieces going down, and then a bigger line and more pieces going down. And you take that hook and you hold it up, everything cascades down from that one hook at the center. And that hook is, does my soul feel safe? So then, am I attracted enough? The attraction takes care of itself. You either are or you're not, or you will be in time or you won't be in time. Do the logistics potentially work out? But let your first question be, does my nervous system sense this person's goodness? Do I sense that they're going to listen to me and care, even when it's a little challenging and hard for them? And when the answer is yes, but not like a giant pyrotechnical yes sometimes, but other times not so much, but essentially yes. We're all human. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's completely safe. But, in my intensives, I talk about this in the very beginning. And I remember one woman who was a psychotherapist. She said, how do I know who's safe? Like, until I'm like a year into it and potentially really disappointed and hurt. And I said, ask that question and build the muscle of sensing around safety, which is honoring your core self. That's a practice of honoring your core self. So in time, she began to be able to tell in 2 dates, 3 dates, even 1 date. And it changed her future. It changed who she met. This is one of the examples of the things that we can do that restructure our being. And when our being, because this is the amazing, rich, this is like the deeper physics of dating. When your being is structured around self-treasuring and looking for goodness and safety, you will attract different people and you'll be attracted to different people. Your attractions will actually begin to shift, and you'll start noticing people who are healthier for you and not wanting to run for the hills, not being bored, but actually being interested and even turned on. This is a great and amazing evolution that happens. So that's my long answer to this very important question.
Oh, it is a very important question. And when you and I reconnected this past January, I guess it was, yeah. It was January. And it was because I was wanting to focus on this area of my life, on my love life. And I had a few men all around, and I had felt that I was neglecting the men that I felt safe with, but not necessarily attracted to. Right. And so I started Googling how to find or how to, I don't know if the word was find, but how to become attracted to men, healthy men. And that's when I had discovered an article that you had written, and I reached out to you and I was like, hey, can you help me with this? So most of us, we didn't grow up observing healthy relationships. So not always in our households as children were our nervous systems regulated to be or to feel safe.
Yes.
So
or
when
to
we
honor and privilege that sense of safety.
Yes. So there's, we've heard these terms like trauma bonding and that, you become attracted to, the bad boy or the person who it just is actually, you feel comfortable in that game of ambiguity inside of that. So how does somebody become attracted to somebody that's healthy for them?
Oh, best question in the world. And this was actually the piece of my book that Oprah excerpted, was this exact piece, how to become attracted to people who are good for you. So the first thing I want to say is none of you are under any obligation to be with someone you're not turned on to. You have a right to be with someone you're attracted to. You do not have to force yourself into a position with someone you're not turned on to just because they're a good person. You do not need to do that to yourself. So I'll say that first. The next thing I'll say is that we have essentially, like really kind of breaking it down to a very binary, kind of slightly over-exaggerated, but still really useful concept. We have two different circuitries of attraction, and they both feel like love. Most of us are used to what I call attractions of deprivation. And that's that feeling like somebody almost loves you right. They almost love you fully. They almost are able to commit. You almost feel safe with them, but not quite. And what we do in our brain with that, if we're really interested in the person, is we feel like there's something lacking in us. And there's this drive to fix ourselves, to change ourselves, to improve ourselves, to do all these things that we think we may need to do to get this person. That circuitry can feel like white hot love. It can feel like the truest love that exists. But what it is a repetition of an old pain, and it usually leads to more pain. We have another circuitry of attraction that some really wise people, they know it from when they were in high school, and they usually find wonderful partners really early on. The rest of us like bounce around for decades. And I was chronically single for decades as I learned this work. I even started a support group for chronically single shrinks, which really helped me. But the other attraction circuitry is attractions of inspiration. That's when you have to be physically attracted, but you're turned on by the person's goodness, by their availability, their consistency, their decency, all things that we all conceptually love, but presented with those things, often we feel like, well, this is boring. This is really boring. This is not exciting enough. And we leave. And I spent years doing that. You have to be attracted to someone, but when you learn to treasure what I call your core gifts, the most sensitive, deep, intimate parts of your being, to dignify and treasure them and only look for people who also do, you start getting attracted to attractions of inspiration. It happens and it's amazing. And those attractions tend to be mutual. And then it's a whole other journey. But when you have that feeling of like someone's deep goodness, their profound commitment, their sexiness at the same time. When you've got that goodness and that sexiness and that commitment together, it's like this quiet explosion of the richest joy. And it's where you want to build your home in the world. And that we get by learning to develop our attractions of inspiration. And this question, does my soul feel safe, is the first step, and that it's a different way to work, but it shifts us, it heals our attachment styles, and it leads us to love. But there's just one more thing I need to say about that, which we may or may not have time to talk about. But when we do that and we meet our attractions of inspiration, we then often, if we're not used to that, we encounter the greatest saboteur of healthy love that exists in the world. And that's the wave of distancing, where all of a sudden, when this guy or this woman or this person becomes available, they start getting boring. We want to go back to the thrill of the hunt. We start being irritated by some physical attribute they have that we never noticed before. What this is a spasm of fear camouflaging itself as disinterest, because this availability is in fact the scariest thing of all to our nervous system. So we want to get out of there. If we have time more later, we could talk about how to get out of that wave. I talk about that like a lot in my courses, but an important thing to know, if you're not used to attractions of inspiration, get ready for the wave. But the good thing is the wave passes.
The wave passes. That's actually really interesting to definitely dive deep into that. So it's interesting. You do this intensive. You do 4 cohorts a year with 12 people each. And you had mentioned to me that majority of the people within these cohorts happen to be women over 40. Yes. There's a little thing inside of me that's like, oh, fuck, like I am newly over 40 and I'm currently single. And I see also all around me, I have amazing female friends who are between that mid-30 to 45 age range. And as I say, amazing. They're gorgeous. They're passionate about their careers. A lot of them do desire family. Not some children, some not children, but they do desire to be
family in the world. Yeah.
To be partnered in a pair bond. And I also I've been newly on the dating app Raya. And this is, quote unquote, one of the exclusive dating apps. And on it, I swipe through and I see all these guys that would be, if there was a list of like most eligible bachelors, I could see many of these men being on that list, because they, it's so funny. I if you ever want to know where tall men go, they're all on Raya. Like literally, they're all above 6'1". They're all handsome. They all seem super successful. And, oftentimes there is a thing in dating over 35 that people kind of look at you of like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong? Why are you still single? And at the same time, because this is the work that I do in the world of, I tend to observe, I'm always in a constant observation of society. And I'm part of these Facebook groups, the Esther Perel discussion group. There's another one on Chump International that is based on the book, Leave a Cheater, Gain a Life. There's another Facebook group on Polarities. And I see people sharing these stories of being married for, 12 years, 15 years, and these just horrible, toxic type of relational behavior that's happening inside of a relationship. I had called a friend recently who is single, and I congratulate her. I'm like, thank God, thank God we're currently single and we're not involved in like that mess. I'd rather be where we are than in something that we need to get out of. So how does one reconcile? What do you think about that observation in society?
Yeah, such an important one. And it's real. It is absolutely real, and I experienced that with women, maybe even a little bit older, where they say often the guys that I meet are looking for women only who are like 25 years younger than them. And, all of these things are really true that that it's difficult out there, but not as true as we might think. Because when you make the deeper shifts, you change your luck, you change your chemistry, you change your behaviors, and it's not a numbers game, and it's not a search for a needle in a haystack. It's an intimacy journey. And when you tackle your deep intimacy journey and live it, you move yourself closer to the luck you're looking for. You know, in these intensives, I work with 12 people for half a year every week. And because the work that needs to be done is so deep and so important and kind of in some ways slow, because it's a complete shift of approach. But what happens in that time is that again and again, I see profound, profound changes that are so hopeful. I see so many people saying, I'm meeting people I never would have met before because they're shifting their inner organization and the way that they're doing it. So I think that we need to get rid of this idea that it's a numbers game. We need to not, because I know people who have fallen in love after they've become paraplegic. I know people who have fallen in love and had wonderful relationships after they've gotten a very serious life-threatening illness diagnosis because of the amazing shifts that happened inside of them. It is so much less about the specifics than we imagine. And I really, really do believe that that's true. So there's work that we can do. And when we do it, we change our luck. Thank God. Because I remember for me, that there was a time when I just knew, these are the two things I knew when I was like out in the gay world, looking heavily for love for decades and remaining eternally single. I knew two things. I knew that I was not tough enough, that I didn't have enough confidence. That's one thing I knew. And the other thing that I knew that I was somewhere between 5 and 20 pounds overweight. And I knew that those were the reasons I wasn't finding love, those two exact things. So I actually worked really hard. I became really buff. I was really buff. I looked amazing. I had a lot more sex. I moved not 1 centimeter closer to real love. That wasn't what it was. That was not what it was. And then the qualities that I had defined as weakness, I discovered this fits with the polarity construct. I discovered were actually deep sensitivity, and they were why people came to me as a therapist, and they ended up the key to my finding my husband and my wonderful relationship. That the parts of myself I thought I had to push down were the parts I had to treasure, privilege, honor, and lead with. And that's the heart of the spiritual adventure in dating.
So before I definitely want to dive into the topic of polarities. However, before we jump into there, what I'm taking from this, because here's the thing is a lot of these women that I'm speaking to, because I've been in, I know them intimately, and they have done the quote unquote work. I mean, I've been a personal development junkie for the past decade. I represent the experiences that are listed at wedeepen.com, and I've participated in many of them. And so sometimes I think it's come to us of like, oh, do more work. Once you do more work. And I do appreciate how you said, yes, that can bring more luck into your life because you're out in the world and you're deepening inside of you, having more introspection into what's happening to you. And it's also attached to faith. This is why spirit is so important with inside of the dating journey, to believe in something bigger than just you.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also think that as a psychotherapist, if I'm working with someone on their self-growth and they have trauma, but I'm not doing trauma-informed work, they're not going to get better. If I'm working with someone and they're doing tons of personal work, but they have an addiction and they're not working on their sobriety, they won't get better. So there are so many different kinds of self-work. This is a particular kind. This is a kind of self-work that relates to sex, romance, dating, and this decision to lead with your most intimate parts, to only look for people who treasure them, and then to get really clear on the ways that we are running from love at the same time as we seek it. If we don't change those patterns, we could be doing years of therapy in other arenas, but it's not specific to this actual dating journey. So self-work is wonderful, essential, and important. But if it's not translated into the nitty-gritty of the specific intimacy journey and the ways we push love away without realizing it, if it's not related to this construct of turning things inside out and leading with our core self, then we could do tons of self-work and it just won't be targeted enough in most cases. That's why the focus really needs to be on the nitty-gritty of how we date, where we go, how we act, how we relate to our core gifts, which is kind of like what I've spent like my life work doing. But one other thing that I want to say that I think is a real message of hope is when you up-level the way that you date, you up-level the kind of person you're going to meet, which means up-leveling your entire future. So it's so essential to do two things. Find a path to finding love that resonates with wisdom and truth for you. That's number one. And number two is to get help. Help from someone who is either a peer or a coach like you, Christina, or like me. But don't do it alone because it's impossible not to go back to our old rewiring without even knowing we're doing it. So those are kind of really important keys, and research backs that up. 90-something% of people who try to change a deep habit will not succeed unless they have a template they believe in and a community of support where they can fail and practice and experiment again and again and again, specifically in this arena.
I'm going to push back for a moment.
Sure.
Because yes, I agree that it's good to have support throughout the journey. I mean, you're even creating an intimacy practice almost with that coach or with that program, or community within that. However, just because even if I am doing all the work and diving deep, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that I am going to find myself in a healthy, lifelong relationship.
Absolutely true. Absolutely dramatically increases your chances, but it totally doesn't guarantee it. Yeah. And the research actually shows that people who do this, there was an amazing piece of research of people who had a coronary incident and their doctors told them unequivocally that they were going to die if they didn't change their way of eating. Literally, they were going to die. And so everybody basically agreed that they would change their way of eating. And within X number of years, something like 95% of them, knowing what this meant, went back to their old ways of eating. So there was a research study done on those 5% of people who actually maintained their diets. And the keys to those 5% were that they had a template they could believe in, and they had a community of support where they could fail, rewire, experiment again and again and again. And there was a wonderful book written by Alan Deutschman about this, a bestseller called Change or Die. So yeah, nothing's guaranteed, but I'll tell you some things that are at least almost guaranteed. From what I've seen is that if you do this work, your attractions begin to up-level. Your sense of self-honoring begins to deepen and intensify. And the ways that you behave around intimacy feel wiser and deeper and truer. And those are great things right there. But those are also forecasters of increased potential for finding love. There's hope.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there is big hope. There is big hope for sure. No doubt. So if we now dive into polarities.
Sure.
And I think I personally, the labeling, and I have an organization that I run called Feminine Weapon. That was a nickname that was given to me over a decade ago. And it was a friend of mine. He said to me, we were out at a CeeLo concert, and he said, Chris, I created this nickname for you. So don't let this go to your head, but you're a feminine weapon. You're so business savvy, but you're such a girl. And I remember when he said that to me, I had felt a cape attached to my back and I could fly. Like all this self-doubts that I was of, this was around the time I was in my late 20s. I had just quit my job. I was a first-time entrepreneur. I had doubts about, because I didn't have my MBA, and how was I going to raise funding? There was all these bits and pieces that of building a business that I didn't have experience in doing. And so when he said that, it was this, somebody was seeing something in me that I wasn't seeing in myself in that moment in time. And so I resonated with his comments. And I grew up playing Barbies and dolls and had girlfriends and, played with the boys, and they would ask me out and, fall in love, and we would do this little dance. And then as, over the past decade, I don't know, I've just felt a little sometimes that the weapon aspect that he was referring to inside of me was starting to become labeled as, oh, you're being masculine. And it was sometimes even used as a weapon to criticize a female, that, oh, you're being too, and for me, what I've adapted to myself is that when someone, I'm like, I personally don't resonate with the labels of being, of course, I can see balance, feminine and masculine, but for me, I'm like, oh, I feel really solid in being a woman as a gender identity. That's for me personally. I feel very solid in that. And so I, like to think of when I'm in that state of what the world classifies as masculine, that is actually my fierce feminine. And I really appreciate the framing that you had recently spoken about of instrumental and expressive. And so I'd love to dive into that. And then also, though, where polarities does show up for me, because I did grow up in a household where my father paid. He was the breadwinner. My mother was a contributor, no doubt. And still, though, to this day, whenever I'm with my father, he pays the bill. He loves to play that role. And I tend to be attracted to that in a masculine, someone who can provide. I will also say is that I've noticed over time, because I've chosen a career path that has required me to bootstrap often. There's been phases of this career where I've slept on people's couches. And if I even rewind back to when I first moved to New York City, straight out of college, I was really the girl who went out to the bar and wouldn't have a drink unless a man offered to buy me a drink, or a woman. It didn't necessarily have to be that, but that was because I was making $21,000 a year living in New York City.
Right.
So there is inside of a relationship with a man, because I date men, if there is inside of that, I like to feel that those kind of masculine qualities that we have been told that defines masculinity, and to then feel that I can be in my feminine more so and take care of him in these soft ways. However, what I really appreciate of listening to your podcast, which your podcast is phenomenal, the Deeper Dating Podcast.
Thank you.
And I was listening, I hear there's a few things I heard you say, to quote, is authenticity trumps polarities. And
Trump's gender identity. Trump's gender stereotypes. Yeah.
Trump's gender stereotypes. Yes.
Yeah.
And you also said something of hiding our authentic self is an act of quiet violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's dive in.
Let's dive in. There is so much here. And I just want to start with this huge subject because you framed all of these different pieces of it. You talked about a way that it can feel limited, a way that it can feel true, this kind of stuff, and a way that we're kind of like stuck as a culture in between two different worlds. And I think all those things are so true. So I think that this is a place where the LGBTQ queer community is kind of leading the way in world evolution, but it hasn't quite kicked in yet. And that is that the gender binary is limiting. It's really limiting. It's this concept that there's masculine and feminine, and those are related directly to genitalia. A woman's body, a woman, someone born a woman, is feminine. A man born a man is masculine, and they have the appropriate genitalia, and that's masculine and that's feminine. And there's a host of qualities that constellate around each of those two genders. It's like a dusty old light switch, on or off. You're either male, you're female. You're masculine, you're feminine. And with kind of like the women's movement now, the parameters for where a woman can feel powerful and expanded have grown. The parameters around where a man can be sensitive and tender and vulnerable have also grown, but there's like a wall. There are these electrified tripwires that say, don't go further than this. And so the problem is thinking, first of all, that there are womanly qualities and male qualities, and that's the essential polarity. Instead of thinking of a light switch on or off, like masculine or feminine, whichever it is, instead imagining like a console of lighting with an almost infinite range of settings on that console. That's what our gender identity needs to be like. When we follow the flow of that, everyone has a part that's deeply, quote unquote, using the old terms, feminine, masculine, and we never know where those are going to come out. All of a sudden in sex, we might be like fiercely aggressive, but we're a woman or we're a man. Maybe in sex, we feel deeply vulnerable and receptive, and it just doesn't fit with this like masculine, feminine thing. So we're like embarrassed. And then dating advice spoken by wise thought leaders, but so deeply misdirected, telling women, you can be super powerful in the office, but when you go on that date, you've got to be soft and vulnerable and connect to your femininity. Well, that's a beautiful concept for everybody. When you leave the job, get in touch with your vulnerability. Why is that more the woman's job than the man's job? It's not. So that's just one example, because I can't tell you how many times I have heard women express a fear of being too powerful because they've been taught by really smart, really trained people that if they show much of that masculine energy, they will scare away the quote unquote alpha males, and they won't be in touch with their true nature, which is such bullshit, because everybody's true nature is different. And it's just such a tyranny. It's such an oppression to think that if you're a woman and you're really going to be spiritual, you must be in touch with that deep, quote unquote, femininity. What if that's not your style? What if you're much more like on top in bed? What about those things? The truth is we are a breathtaking spectrum of gender identities, and we need to accept that. And here's something also amazing that I have seen in my decades of work as a therapist. This is an amazing, amazing, profound thing. And I'll tell a story that kind of captures it. The stuff that where you feel like you're being in gender taboo land, oh, this is like too masculine or too feminine, is actually your nuclear power. When you integrate that part into your being, you become this so much more amazing version of you. And this is why researchers now are not using the concept of masculine and feminine. They're using the concept of expressive versus instrumental. So that's not matched to anybody's genitalia. Those are being qualities, and everyone can find different places on the spectrum to be with that. And the research actually shows that couples where people are locked into those gender roles are less happy and less sexually joyous than people who have deep, deep flexibility and fluidity. So just this quick story. During the age of AIDS, my best friend, Michael, was really sick. Best friend, I can't even describe. And he passed away. And I wasn't able to cry. I was not able to cry. And I went to a therapist. And he was a gay man, Harold Kuden, brilliant author. And he said to me, he said, can you find the part inside yourself that can grieve? And I went inside and I looked and I said, yeah. And it's really weird to me. It was this very wide-hipped, undulating kind of woman who, it was like a fertility goddess kind of like self, but it was a self I had never touched before or seen. And for me, as a gay man growing also up in this gender binary thing about gay men really better be masculine, it was a hard one to touch. But he said, go with her. So I felt into her, and the dam broke, and the tears poured out because it was her who could grieve. It was that beautiful part of me that could grieve. That was the essence of expressiveness. And that's just a story of how those gender taboo parts of ourselves can actually like enrich us in the most profound ways. So culturally, we're still stuck. I want to make room for everybody just being exactly where you are. It's so wonderful. The thought of like a guy having the power, the capacity to pay as an act of generosity, but not in any way diminishing you or disempowering you. That's a beautiful thought. Playing top role, playing bottom role, all of these things are beautiful, beautiful in their own right. And we are in the middle of a cultural shift. We're not finished with it yet. So all of us have to be really gentle with ourselves and take it really slowly, but realize that the world of expression is so much bigger than the gender binary. Oh, one other little thing I got to say, because you talked about polarity. Polarity is really important. Eros is a spark that needs to jump a gap. Difference is really important, but it could be the difference between like someone who's really intellectual and someone who's really emotional, someone who is, regardless of gender, instrumental versus expressive, someone who is super smart in math versus someone who is super smart in English and literature, like someone who's highly disciplined with numbers and someone who makes the home beautiful. There's 20 billion kind of polarities, and every time we encounter a difference in the person we love, it's kind of hard, but it's kind of sexy, but it's not limited to masculine, feminine. And God knows in LGBTQ relationships, we have the freedom not to have to be there, have there be a man energy and a woman energy. There is a fluidity. And that's why John Gottman, one of the greatest living researchers around intimacy and relationships, says that the LGBTQ community, for that very reason, is about 50 years ahead of the general population in evolution, because they've let go a lot of those gender taboos.
I love hearing about the LGBT community leading the way. And because even though I see myself as a straight woman, I can still look at that, the evolution that's happening there and benefit from it. And it's similar to polyamory. I'm not really interested in having a polyamorous relationship. However, I can look at polyamory and see how they authentically communicate with one another. So these bits and pieces that we get to pull from to create our own curriculum, sometimes we think that, because I am categorized in this way or in this, I need to go with these types of people. And it's not that way. It's kind of a calling for the mixing of everybody all together.
And your ability to do that is very beautiful, because I've said this information to so many people, and so many people run back to the gender binary. You have just been so interested and open and like willing to play and experiment with these ideas. And that's pretty rare. And I just adore it.
Thank you. And also too, is a colleague friend, Chris Cosirol. He is a matchmaker, relationship coach for pretty much the Black community. And one time we were talking on the phone and he was sharing with me what they were experiencing in the Black community. And I remember thinking, wait, Chris, this is the same things that are happening in the quote unquote white community. Like all of everything that we're learning and how to more deeply connect with one another. It's shared knowledge and shared information that we can benefit from when we're willing to step outside of the labeling of it, which I believe the labeling and the categorizing is what is getting us into trouble. Because we're so much more complex and easy at the same time, but things are nuanced. There's a lot of gray. There's just a ton of gray.
And that act of being able to bear difference is such an act of it's a muscle that we need to build as human beings. And it's not easy. Yeah.
And I think it requires too of renegotiating at times of especially once you're in partnership. So last night I went to a coaching event. A friend of mine is a phenomenal coach, and she held this circle. And there was a woman who is in a relationship, and she had been playing a role in that relationship where she felt she was had a lot of stress on her shoulders around keeping the finances set. And she was tired of that, and she wanted to renegotiate it. And I witnessed that rather than look at the overarching bigger picture, there was have a conversation with them. You want to be more in your feminine.
Right.
And I was like, wait, where did we just go with feminine, masculine, and you want to be the feminine in the relationship and this and that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that, well, that's more of just renegotiating roles, renegotiating as opposed to taking that off the table.
Yes. And we all have to be gentle with ourselves. We really do, because we're in the middle of a transition in this world. And so we're learning slowly, we're learning carefully. But every step we take, every step you take, everybody out there, toward expressing the taboo gender kind of expressions is a step toward your own profound empowerment. You will open doors, because this is the bottom line. The stuff we're the most timid to reveal in any aspect is the stuff that is the richest, deepest, most powerful parts of ourselves. Those are our core gifts. That's for a whole other conversation. But it's an adventure.
So to end this conversation, where I see polarities trips people up mostly is in the early dating process. And a friend of mine, a colleague, he wrote the book Datanomics. This is John Berger, who wrote Datanomics, how the dating pool is lopsided for heterosexuals. And then his follow-up book is called Make the First Move. And in that book, he is encouraging women to make the first move because there are more single women than there are single men. And so for women to be able to be, to quote unquote, and winning isn't necessarily the right term. It doesn't feel correct to say that, but for lack of better words, I will in this moment, that go after what you want. But if a woman goes after what she wants and she asks a man out or expresses interest, usually we're taught in the conversation of polarities to wait, maybe wink at him, let him know you're interested.
Absolutely. Like the rules, the book, The Rules. Yeah. So that's changing. And every woman who takes that action, guys get more used to it and the culture begins to change, because that's how fashion changes. That's how pictures of looks change. That's how mores change. So absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Take that brave act.
Take the brave act. And that even comes, that's wiping away then everything changing, because there's Dr. Pat Allen had her, very structured in the way that men and women do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you make of, what's your advice?
My advice is that you need to let go of gender rules that limit you and take you away from your authenticity. Period. The effing end. And advice from even well-known, well-respected teachers that is based on the gender binary will have profound limitations. In the Jewish religion, there's one kind of school which is called Reconstructionism, which believes that the religion needs to be recreated every generation. We need to recreate dating rules that are based on authenticity rather than these gender taboos and rigid gender binary rules. That's a job for all of us to do and all of us to play in.
Thank you so much, Ken. I learn from you in every conversation, just like I did here today. Thank you. And I am excited. You and I will be facilitating the Dating Dojo at the Biohacking Conference.
Yes.
What are you most excited about that event?
Oh, well, it's going to be really fun to work with you. It's going to be really fun to work with people who are really interested in hacking their biology and their psychology so that now they can hack their search for love, because when you up-level that, you up-level your future. I just think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be an adventure. And for many years, raising a family, I kind of have moved away from doing big in-person events. And so this is going to be my first big in-person event in maybe almost a couple decades. So I'm super, super excited about that too.
Well, if you're listening, definitely come join us at the Biohacking Conference. That is if you're listening before September 16th of 2022. Ken and I will be there. We'll facilitate the Dating Dojo for 200 of the 2,000 attendees who are currently single. It's pretty excited. It feels revolutionary that Dave Asprey, who was on episode 44 of Deepen with Christina, that he asked to have a singles event at a biohacking conference. How revolutionary is it that, producers are thinking about how do we have our attendees feel more connected and get more intimate? Because hey, if you're in a space where people are interested in the same thing as you, which is a growth-minded space, it's the perfect spot for.
That's right.
Yes, yep. Yes. So come join us, Ken. I'm excited. We also may be facilitating the Dating Dojo in Los Angeles. If you're not going to the Biohacking Conference on September 14th, you can check out wedeepen.com. Definitely go there, become a member, sign up, so you will get alerted of when the Dating Dojo is coming to you, for sure, and other experiences. Ken, your podcast is amazing. Definitely go check that out.
Thank you.
Deeper Dating. Anything else that you would like for listeners to know?
Sure. So, you mentioned all of these wonderful things. I would say deeperdatingpodcast.com. You get a transcript of every episode there. There are like 140 episodes. It's been a deep joy to do that. My book, Deeper Dating, which was a #1 Amazon bestseller, is, always available. There's an audio course as well. And there's this very precious thing that I do only twice a year, which is the Deeper Dating Intensive. We've already just started a new set. We'll be doing another one. And so if you go to deeperdatingintensive.com, you can learn about it. It's a very small and very precious half-year event, working really closely with me and an absolutely amazing community of other learners. And of course, you can find me on all the social media under Deeper Dating or Ken Page LCSW. And I look forward to seeing you in my community and being connected to you, Christina, and being connected to We Deepen. And I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ken, for sharing your zone of genius with us. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Deepen with the Christina. Just a reminder, please go ahead and rate, subscribe, follow. This helps more people to find this podcast and check out that calendar. While I love recording this podcast and connecting with you in this way, what really excites me is being in person with you. So come out, let's be together. If there's no experiences happening in your city right now, they are worth traveling to, especially the ones that are multi-day. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, enjoy. Bye.